They refer this incidents to a phenomenon called induced atmospheric vibrations, or in a very simple language, it's a weather-based conditions that has caused the some of the challenges or the synchronization problem across the network. So first of all, this is a hypothesis and this is not confirmed yet. Uh, but this is one of the very strong assumptions that the experts are saying that this can be the reason that this blackout happened, and this refers to the phenomenon when we have extreme energy release or the temperature rise in the surface of the Earth. The air around that surface will warm up, and the warm air will rise, and it will create the conditions, and it will actually put the pressure on the surrounding air, which are cooler and more dense. And these challenges or this interaction between the rising warm air and the cooler air around that will create a kind of a wave-like phenomenon, that can cause the vibrations. That this atmospheric vibration will be induced into the power lines, the transmission lines, especially the long distance transmission lines, and that create a blackout across the network. Regardless of the source of this problem, whether this is actually the induced atmospheric vibration or it can be a bushfire. For example, in Australia, we are experiencing a lot of bushfires in Australia, or it can be any reasons that put the pressure on the entire electrical power grids. For example, in this scenario, this has been induced atmospheric vibration. It can be cyclone, it can be bushfire. So we cannot avoid these conditions in the future. But the problem, I think, the main source of the problem is where our electrical network is standing at the moment. So we have a very purely centralized electrical network, which is globally, and this is not something. We don't have a lot of examples of distributed energy networks. Globally, we have actually evolved our electrical networks around a centralized system. And this is because traditionally we had large scale power plants outside of the cities. We produce electrical energy resources or electrons. Then we actually use the transmission lines to actually travel all of those electrons or transmit all of those electrons from the power source, which is the power plant, all the way to the loads, which are our houses or hospitals or loads. Nowadays, for example, electrical cars, I mean, the cars are also electric, so we need those electrons to be transmitted from long distances into our cars and houses. So when you are focusing a lot on the centralized energy systems, any problem that disrupts this network will cause this kind of problem. And this is, I feel, this is what we have been actually trying to actually focus on, and saying that focusing on centralized energy systems is a really big mistake. And if something happen, because everything around our lifestyle is becoming electrified, our cars, our mobilities, our IT devices, our heating and cooling systems, our banking, the businesses, everything becomes electrical and electrified. So if we have any disruption, let's say war, weather conditions, bushfires, if something similar to what happens in Europe happened, we cannot avoid the consequences, and we cannot have another centralized system to run in parallel with what we actually have. So we have to focus on making these centralized energy system more distributed. So we are very vulnerable because all of these pressure that are being imposed into the grid makes the entire grid very sensitive. If we didn't have a sensitive grids in Europe, we didn't experience what we experienced just yesterday. So that's why I always mention that the sensitivity of our electrical network is really significant, and this is very even more severe than what we have experienced during COVID. During COVID, what happened? The COVID pandemic, because of the virus, we were unable to move. So we wanted to actually capture the movement of the virus. So what if I tell you you cannot drive or you cannot go to the train station because the train doesn't move, because your car doesn't have energy resources to move? So the situation that we will have if we don't have a constant reliable energy resources would be very similar to the situation that we had during pandemic, if not worse. Our network is very vulnerable because of the pressure that is happening, and it's just a blink that if you have any weather conditions or abnormal weather conditions, one single blackout will be spread out across the country or multiple countries. And the problem is that we are centralized. If there is something happen, let's say in part of Europe, the other side of the Europe will be affected as well. And in Australia, we have the same thing. This is the main reason that our electrical network is not resilient and is very vulnerable. And there is a solution for that, that we have to reshape our electrical energy network. Unfortunately, is a good example of the problems that can be faced by the community if we don't solve the problems now. If in 2000, let's say 17 or 2016, someone would come and tell you that we have a problem in our healthcare system, and if there is a pandemic happening, our healthcare system and the resources that we have within the healthcare system and the shortages that we have within the healthcare provider will cause a massive financial health problems across the world. In 2016, no one could imagine that a virus can actually test and disrupt entire health system. And this is what exactly I'm envisioning for the future of energy systems. I really feel that these examples are going to be very frequent in the future if we are pushing forward a lot of electrifications across the world. And the only solution for this is to reshape our electrical networks. I know that we are starting in a lot of research centers talking about the community microgrids, decentralized energy systems, but it's not supported obviously by the mainstreams, governments, or the funding bodies. So the community microgrids that we are talking about all the time is that the community and different part of the countries in different part of regions, they have access to the clean or affordable renewable energy or any type of energy systems that they can maintain on the time of crisis. Let's say in Europe, the same thing happened. If you had previously, for example, in every hospital you have UPS, so which is uninterrupted power sources, but they are very limited. Imagine in Europe now, last week, we had integrated distributed energy system or community microgrids in different parts of Europe. And you could see that at the time of the disaster, let's say induced atmospheric vibrations, that we had a major blackout, all of these community microgrids can operate and provide the minimum requirements for the energy demands. And then when the centralized system would be healing, they can actually provide the additional supports for the integrated energy system. And this is what we are talking about, but it requires to have a major reshape in our electrical network.